a lot of evolutionary biologists, a lot of origin of lifers, a lot of astrobiologists, they do feel a lot of resistance. And when you talk about J.C. Bose happens to be the first modern scientist of India. I mean, if you want to give any epithet to anyone, J.C. Bose is the one. Because had it not been him, had it not been Mahendra Sarkar, who established the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science, there wouldn't have been any Indian science. Now, coming to the Indian history part of it, of your point, between 1767 and J.C. Bose came to the scene in around 1880, late 1880s, 1890s. So, in between, you lost around 130, 140 years. So, the first institution where research really happened in India through Indian people was the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science, where Bose began his study, and later on he established the Bose Institute. So that's why when you have so much being discussed, even within the G20 circuit, there's a lot being discussed around artificial intelligence. What I believe is Civil20 is the only platform in the G20, and even after the closure of G20 summit, after the New Delhi declaration, what we should do, especially universities like ours, Indus, we should start exploring interfaces between biosciences, design sciences, engineering, so that and ecology, so that we start to understand the larger design that has been created by nature for us.
There is one interesting aspect in the list of achievements of Dr. Chaitanya Giri that was not read there. Probably he also didn't give it there. Right? And it is, he was the only Indian member of a mission called Rosetta, which was an European space mission basically. It is to collect samples from a comet. Through a robot arm, a small vehicle would land on a comet, and then it would collect samples, and then those samples will be analyzed. And his one very important interest, and it is very relevant to the current topic also, is the search for extraterrestrial life, or rather the life forming molecules in space, so that we can understand the probability and possibilities of life in other planets. Now, this particular topic is about, the conversation that I am going to have with you is about natural intelligence. There are two things that I came across when I was doing my science writing in Swarajya. One is that when Jagadish Chandra Bose demonstrated in the Royal Society how inanimate objects, plants, and animal tissues, they showed the same kind of response to the stimuli. He was kind of condemned by the entire group there. Yes, a few exceptions. Everybody condemned him. Okay, and then there was a student of Thomas Huxley who saw this, took him to Linnaeus Society, and there he demonstrated the whole thing again. And in Linnaeus Society it was accepted because they had this tradition of hosting evolutionists. So, you think there is a kind of apprehension for the Western science to accept that there is a continuity of life and there could be a continuity of intelligence. Is there a theoretical basis for this? Do they have a theoretical framework for this?
So I'll firstly, it's an honor having an in-person conversation with Aravindan ji and with you all. And I thank Professor Sharma for making this happen, because we've been interacting for the past 7 years.
7 years.
But we haven't met in person ever.
Yeah.
So our conversations were happening all the time over telephone calls, over emails, over e-conversations, virtual conversations. So, and for the first time, we are sitting in person
meeting for the
with
first
each
time,
other.
yes.
So, firstly, thank you, Indus University, for making that happen. I'll come to the last point that you mentioned. Why is there an aversion? Uh, Western science has had quite diverse patronage. So, a lot of science is supported in West through Vatican. A lot of science in the West has been supported through the various kingdoms that have existed. So, especially the kingdoms in Austria, the kingdoms in and around in France, the Gauls, the Anglo-Saxons that spanned from the UK up to northern Germany, the Dutch, royalty, the Norwegian royalty, they've all supported science. And many a times these royals were, although quite secular in their approach, and I'm not talking about the Indian secular context, in the Western secular context. So at times when they were supporting science, but they were also wanting that science to not flourish. And it continues even to date. So I'll give you an example. So while I was doing my second postdoc, I had applied to Tokyo Institute of Technology, and there's an institute which does very well. It's called Earth Life Science Institute, and this particular institute is the only research institution in the world dedicated to origin of life studies. Now, origin of life studies is, it does not have any industrial value. No industry wants to support it because there's no immediate value to gain out of it. There's no product to be developed, there's no prototype, there are no wars to be fought through it, nothing of that sort. So, no industry supports it. So, who's going to support it? Philanthropic foundation. Which philanthropic foundation? Philanthropic foundation who benefits from it. There is a foundation that I won't name, but it believes in creationism and it has lots of money. So this particular foundation, it supported some of us, it financed some of us, and the target was to prove within 2 years that origin of life came from abiogenesis processes. So it happened through set of chemical reactions without any intervention from God as they perceive it. Now, origin of life, to solve that question is it's a grand challenge. You can't solve that question within 2 years. At best, you can start warming up within 2 years, but you can't solve it because we haven't solved that question in the past so many years. And if you take in the modern context, since the time of Renaissance, European Renaissance, it hasn't been solved. And chances are that it won't be solved even at least for the foreseeable future. So giving us only 2 years to prove origin of life, and if we are unable to prove it, then they are steadfast about their commitment to the thought that it is God that has created everything. So a domain like origin of life, which is so important, which will have consequences on everyone, every society, every community that exists here on earth. Imagine you getting to know that there is life on Mars. What sort of socio-economic, what sort of ideological, what sort of psychological consequences it would have on all of us, because all that we have been believing, all that we have been thinking of, okay, there might be believers that okay, there is life elsewhere on earth, but that's a part of belief. What happens when that belief gets consolidated? What happens when that belief gets concretized? It has immense psychological ramifications. So the point that I'm making is the West, or even in the coming years, you see United Arab Emirates recently had a mission going to the moon. You have the Saudi Space Commission now wanting to go to the moon, they want to go to Mars. But what happens when they go to the moon and Mars and find life? It completely destroys the core of their belief system, because for them everything has been created by a prophet or an almighty creator. So that shatters their entire narrative that has been floating around for the past 1500 or 1000 2000 years. So that's the reason why a lot of evolutionary biologists, a lot of origin of lifers, a lot of astrobiologists, they do feel a lot of resistance. And when you talk about J.C. Bose, now for any of you who don't know, J.C. Bose happens to be the first modern scientist of India. I mean, if you want to give any epithet to anyone, J.C. Bose is the one. Because had it not been him, had it not been Mahendra Lal Sarkar, who established the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science, there wouldn't have been any Indian science. Now, coming to the Indian history part of it, of your point, when you go to the DST website, Department of Science and Technology, I am sure some of you might be picking up funds from them for a variety of research through SCRB and whatnot. You'll find that on their website they mention the first Indian research institution is Survey of India. And Survey of India was established in 1767. Okay, I'll just give you जैसे कहते हैं ना, आप क्रोनोलॉजी को समझिए. 7 साल पहले उसके, just 7 years before, the Marathas fought Abdali in 1761 at the Third War of Panipat. And within 7 years, a Survey of India is established. Who established Survey of India? The British. The British East India Company established it. What are we doing now? We are admitting that a British established institution is the first scientific institution in India. What was the task of Survey of India? Survey of India's task was to survey India, of course, for all the economic gains, for all the colonial gains. So, as a derivative of Survey of India, you had that major exercise that was created, which is known as the Trigonometric Survey of India, जिसमें से you measured all the major peaks in the country. Your Mount Everest, Sagarmatha is not called Sagarmatha but Everest because of the Surveyor General of Trigonometric Survey. His name was Everest. Then आप कश्मीर में जाओगे, the K1 peak, the K2 peak, they are all measured by these Britishers. What was their aim? Their aim was only to extract economic benefits out of India. And when we hear that the $40 trillion were looted throughout the period of colonialism, number one, you can't quantify the number, it might exceed $40 trillion for sure. And when you have such institution regularly surveying India, then there were Botanical Survey of India, there was Archaeological Survey of India, okay. Then meteorology came to India, not the modern meteorology, because the British ships wanted to know, wanted to understand the monsoon winds, the monsoon characteristics of the Indian Ocean region. That's why Meteorological Society of India was created. There were 3 geomagnetic observatories raised. One geomagnetic observatory was in port of Madras that time. One was in port of Bombay, especially in a region called Kolaba in Mumbai. So Kolaba had the geomagnetic observatory, and these geomagnetic observatory played a role of setting up the telegraph wires,
which played an important role in 1857.
In 1857, in the communications domain. Now, between 1767 and J.C. Bose came to the scene in around 1880, late 1880s, 1890s. So, in between, you lost around 130, 140 years. So, the first institution where research really happened in India through Indian people was the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science, where Bose began his study, and later on he established the Bose Institute.
Now, coming to this particular aspect, it is very interesting that when you have a particular religion that says that, or when you have a theology, let us forget religion, that says that God created the world and all the species in the world, and then gave human beings, particularly man, particularly white man, the dominance over all the created creatures, then what happens is that, how do we define human being? And then the God comes and gives a final revelation, or sacrifices himself for the sake of that particular human being. And the salvation of the human being is dependent on the belief of a particular god dying for the entire humanity, or a particular god sending the final prophet. So there is a belief system like that. Okay. Now the point is, what if, forget Mars, forget Andromeda galaxy, what if an octopus has intelligence? You remember that in this particular famous story of Adam and Eve. We all know about that story, right? We won't be knowing the stories of our own Nasadiya Sukta, but we will be knowing the Adam and Eve story. So in Adam and Eve story, the Eve made Adam eat the fruit, and then he committed the first sin, right? The original sin. Let us get into the symbolism of it. Let us forget the mythological parts, get into the symbolism of it. The meaning of that is, once he ate the fruit of wisdom or knowledge, he understood what is right and what is wrong. That is what Bible says. So that means he acquired intelligence. So the human being who has already been created in the image of God acquires intelligence. And that makes him different from the entire creation, makes him separate. Now we tell in the science, for example, an octopus has intelligence, chimpanzee has intelligence, the same intelligence as a human being. For example, there is one very interesting experiment that Carl Sagan mentions in Demon Hunted Universe, where he says this: the two rhesus monkeys are made to sit facing each other, and if a monkey that is sitting on this side pulls a lever, the monkey on the other side gets an electric shock. At the same time, the monkey that pulls the lever will get a small ball of food. If it does not pull the lever, then it will not get the food. But if it pulls the lever, it will have to see that monkey getting the shock. Okay, this is the experimental setup. What happened was 80% of the time, the experimental monkey went without food instead of administering a shock for the fellow monkey that was not related to it. That means these moral values are not specific to human beings, they are there in other species also. Now if you accept that, then you will have to say that intelligence is there in other species. Then if a particular God comes and dies for only humanity, or gives salvation for only humanity, then that God is irrelevant to the other intelligences that are existing in this very planet. So naturally, if I am a scientist, even if I don't have faith in God and all that, I am a Western scientist, then I will have this bias, this conceptual bias that except human beings, others cannot have intelligence. That becomes a natural thing for us. Now, let me come to the inverse of this in India. When we grow up, I used to be told a particular story. It's a very interesting story, I will tell you. There was a guy called Tatipanta. Tatipanta means a person who actually has a big pot for curd. Okay, and this was in Gokul. And one day, as usual, Krishna was stealing butter and he was running away, and he was running and Yasoda was chasing. So this guy comes to Tatipanda and says, just hide me. My mother is coming. If she catches me, she will beat me. So Tatipanta somehow knows that Krishna is the Brahman. Krishna is the ultimate divine. So Tatipanta says, I will do it, but you have to do whatever I say after that. So Krishna says, okay, I am a small boy. What is this guy going to ask me? So he tells, okay. So Tatipanta hides him inside a pot. This pot in which they put the curd. Yasoda comes and Tatipanta says, did Krishna come here? No. And so she goes away. And then what Tatipanta does is he sits over the pot. Krishna couldn't come out. And he asks, okay, what is that you want? Tell me, I will. And he says, give me moksha. You promise me moksha, I will leave you out. And then Krishna, he thinks, see, I am a small boy in Gokula and what you are asking, I am running away from my mother. I am afraid of my mother and you have to tell lies and you are asking me moksha, what is this? And he tells, I know you are the Ishvara, you have to give me moksha. And he tells, okay, I will give you moksha. But he was not getting him. He is still there. Krishna is still there, trapped. And Krishna says, what now? I am getting suffocated. Tell me, what is that now? And then Tatipanta says, now this is important. Tatipanta says, Not only moksha for me, moksha for also the pot. The pot in which I was hiding you. You should give moksha for that pot. You promise me moksha for the pot, I will let you down. And Krishna says, no other way. Okay, I am giving you moksha for the pot also. See, this is the stories with which we grow up. So naturally, if we tell that inanimate object has a feeling, it has some kind of an intelligence, naturally we are able to understand that. Now coming to the, we were discussing another one aspect here. Remember, there was a Western scientist, an American scientist, physiologist, his name was Herbert Jennings. And he discovered that a particular single-celled animal can actually have 5 kind of different responses and can learn from the different stimuli and choose one of those responses. Single-celled, no brain, no nervous system, and then this was dismissed by the establishment. After 103 years, one scientist from Sri Lanka and another one from India and another one Harvard scientist, they said they redid the whole thing with the AI augmented instruments, and they found that this is actually true, and even a very good algorithm cannot predict actually how this will react, right? At that time we were having a discussion. Yeah. That was the time when you told about natural intelligence, which was a concept that you created. Can you explain that?
So coming to the last part again, so any unicellular organism does not have intelligence as we think, a higher order intelligence. It does not have a brain, it does not have organs, it does not have limbs or anything. All it knows is how to exist within a certain fluidic environment. For all those who have, who can, imagine biology, imagine a single cellular organism, it will exist in a fluidic environment. So all that it knows is how to exchange salt ions in and out, how to maintain some sort of equilibrium when it comes to the pH levels, or when it comes to the ionic concentrations within it and outside it, and all it knows is how to get food and excrete it out. That's intelligence. That's good enough, because it knows how to survive. It knows how to live, it knows where to find food, and it knows what to eat within its own environment. So a unicellular organism existing in, let's say, Kerala is very different from a unicellular organism existing here in Ahmedabad, because of the climatic difference, the ecological differences. But it knows how to survive wherever it has grown. That is intelligence. Coming back to the first story that you spoke of, Adam and Eve, there is also an example of natural intelligence over there. So actually in the entire Adam and Eve story, quite ironically, it is the serpent,
yes,
which is more intelligent than Adam and Eve.
And God.
And God.
Yes.
So the serpent has been attributed the necessary intelligence. So where do I think of natural intelligence, and when do I think of it? I think of it when I hear such kind of stories. Coming back to, let's say, the recently released Adipurush trailer, the movie trailer, what you see is a host of animals, different kind of vanaras that are shown in that movie, different species. One is a gorilla, one is a lemur that have been shown, and each of them have played a role in fighting that particular war. So and within that trailer itself, Lakshmana asks Ram that you are the prince of Ayodhya, you can call on your army and march over to Lanka to save Sita. He doesn't do that, but he raises an army of all the Pashus. So it is the army of Pashus that fight the army of Ravan, who is supposed to be the greatest Shiva Bhakt. Yes. So imagine the ironies that are located in that particular entire episode of Ramayana, the Yuddha Kanda. So natural intelligence has always existed in our stories, in our history. We have always respected it. We just recently heard in the previous lecture that we have always had this habit, homely habits of giving away some food for the creatures that exist around you from your own plates, from your own thali. So that has always existed, but we don't attribute it now, we don't acknowledge it now, because our paths or the mechanistic way of approaching knowledge has led us to explore artificial intelligence more than natural intelligence, because we want to be God. We want to see ourselves as gods. And how do we do that? We can't create any life. We'll create life-like mechanical machinery to make it happen. So that's why when you have so much being discussed, even within the G20 circuit, there's a lot being discussed around artificial intelligence. What I believe is Civil 20 is the only platform in the G20, and even after the closure of G20 summit, after the New Delhi declaration, what we should do, especially universities like ours, Indus, we should start exploring interfaces between biosciences, design sciences, engineering, so that and ecology, so that we start to understand the larger design that has been created by nature for us. So the one aspect of it could be biomimetics or biomimicry. One aspect of it could be designing certain objects or certain prototypes, taking inspiration from animals, certain plants and whatnot, uh, deriving certain philosophies from other animals and other plants and the way they operate, the way they interact with each other, the way they interact with nature. And subliminally, we have been doing that. Look at the social media platforms where people, where dog loving people, cat loving people, look at the way they interpret their pet behaviors. We already do that. It's just that we haven't done it in a proper formal manner in the academic circuits. And it is very unfortunate that such really forward looking thoughts are not entertained by the custodians of formal science, and it is up to privately run universities and privately run philanthropies to start supporting such explorations.
Oh, Dr. Giri, now getting a bit deeper into this, there has been a lot of talk about, let us say, consciousness studies, which actually falls into the realm of biology as well as it falls into the realm, in a way, of AI, at least at a philosophical level, with hard problems of David Chalmers and all. Now, there is a school like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, who have been telling that there is essentially consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, and there are the microtubules in which there are quantum cohesion, or Bose-Einstein content state is there, and all this create consciousness, and consciousness should be studied as a quantum phenomenon. Then the other side, you have quantum computers, qubits. Okay, talking about qubits, usually in a bit you have 1 and 0, and in qubits you have more possibilities around it, right? And we have already a conceptual framework like Saptabanki, where you have yes, no, maybe, like that there are 7 states, right? Now, looking at this both, the consciousness having involving quantum operations, quantum processes at one point, and qubit becoming the future of computing and hence will play a major role in AI. Understanding this in a very conceptual way, it will definitely help creating an interface, right? In this, does India have a civilizational advantage? Are we actually using this civilizational advantage?
For now, not. We are not.
But conceptually, do we
Conceptually, we
have?
can. Conceptually, we have that, all that. Uh, when you spoke about quantum, that I can go back to around 2005 to 2010, that phase. So this was the phase of the Obama administration in the US. they had initiated a pan-governmental study, and it was called the Brain Initiative. And the entire scope of the Brain Initiative, which somehow got lost. I don't hear about that initiative anymore. Either it has been cloaked into secrecy now, or it has been completely extinguished. But that Brain Initiative was trying to understand the various hidden aspects of the inner cortexes of the brain and how does it function. Does it enable any healing? Does it enable any capabilities that we are unaware of? And perhaps if that study would have succeeded, or if that study would have been in the public domain, which could be another possibility, we would have known more. And perhaps Americans could have approached the Indic way of approaching consciousness while they pursued that study, or they might be doing so, we don't know. So again, there is a duality, there is 1-0 in there. It might be a study which is ongoing, it might be a study which has completely been extinguished. But after that, you see, there was great talk about, so this was again, so Obama administration, Brain Initiative was around 2010. 4 years down the line came the Narendra Modi administration here. And around that phase, Niti Aayog was created. What did Niti Aayog start speaking on? The first buzzword around that time was big data. Do you hear about big data now? No, that buzzword has gone down completely. What you talk about now is artificial intelligence. Slightly before COVID, it was machine learning. So all these are more or less interconnected domains, and they have been made buzzwords because we sort of do a kumbaya, a kumbaya dance around it. We don't go any further than that. So what we need is a more strategic thinking. We know that there is great potential in the repository of knowledge that India has, but we do not have proper plans to execute that repository at this moment. Let me take you back to 1930s, late 1930s. So Hitler's SS was quite curious about coming to India, and it was very much curious about going into Himalayas to find a esoteric city called Shambhala. And it had sent 2 or 3 expeditions in the search of Shambhala. Shambhala for them was the epicenter of the universe and whatnot. So, and they were looking out for the great power that resides in Shambhala, so that they can become superpowers and they can rule the planet for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they had sent expeditions to Tibet. What happened thereafter? They fell down. The Nazi Germany got completely trampled over, and the entire effort that they had taken went and became folklore now. It's an urban folklore that Tibetans, so Hitler's army was in Tibet at that point in time. So what I'm trying to say over here is, even a short-lived government like the Nazis have thought so deep. And here we are celebrating our 75 years, we are into the 76th year, we still aren't thinking deep. And the reason for that is we haven't had privately run institutions which can take such initiatives in an intrepid manner. अब तक ये होता था कि for every science that you do, beg to Delhi, ask for money to Delhi, go to those very 2 or 3 specific agencies and पैसे दे दो, हमें research grant दे दो. क्यों? Why Ahmedabad can't generate money? Mumbai can't generate money? Bengaluru can't generate money? How much do you need? A few $1 million, take it. So this hasn't been happening. And if you want to explore consciousness, if you really want to explore the brain, if you really want to explore in an Indic fashion, the government is not the place to go to ask for grants. It is you, it is your people, it is your money, it is the private sector money that will go into supporting these kind of initiatives. The Americans have known this for now. The American private sector, the American philanthropy supports such initiatives, and it is high time that we learn such best practices from them and start exploring. So whatever we are discussing right now, Indic wisdom for sustainable lifestyle or for sustainable, uh, uh, endurement of our civilization, it is the society that has to churn money, and it is the society, the Vaishyas in the society will have to support the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas will have to support the security of such enterprises and such initiatives, and the Shudras will have to sort of make sure that all the wherewithal necessary for the Kshatriyas, for the Brahmanas, or for the Vaishyas, they become the logistic chains for it. So we'll have to start thinking in an innovative way as a society.
Yeah, so now again, coming back to the natural intelligence part, um, what do you think would be, if I am asking you to design a framework for natural intelligence, for you were in Japan, right? And I think there was this famous, very famous experiment of using the slime mold to design the metro network, right?
That's again biomimicry in designing the metro system.
Right. And this slime mold, which we consider as, if I am calling someone a slime mold, it is like an insult,
It's an
right?
insult.
And it was this slime mold, the way it found its way through the puzzles, that was used by the engineers to design the entire metro for Tokyo. So that is the biointelligence that is present in an ordinary slime mold. Now, interestingly, in the case of India, okay, now we are talking about smart cities. There was a polymath, his name was Patrick Geddes, who was a close associate of again Jagadish Chandra Bose, and he was also disciple of Swami Vivekananda, and he was a person who came and studied India's temple towns. Now, when he studied the temple towns, particularly in South India, and he studied Kanchipuram, Madurai, all those places. In Kanchipuram, he found that all the wastewaters of the city in the traditional design, where it was going, he couldn't find it out. Finally, he found it out. They were all going to the what we call Nandavanam. Okay, it is a small temple associated park-like thing, but not a park, where you grow all the flowers for all the plants for the flowers of the deity. So all this water was going there, and it was becoming good manure. And the next day, he says something that is very foul-smelling. The next day becomes a beautiful flower. That was the thing. Now, this man was very much interested in this temple cities, and he considered the plans of temple cities as a kind of basis for the future city planning. And the British government asked him to create a design for enlargement of Kanchipuram. And he designed that based on the ancient Indian model, very similar to that. Where there should be temples, there should be temples. Where there should be Nandavans, there should be Nandavans. Where there should be a pond, there should be a pond. He designed like that, and he gave it to the British. And the British said it is not British enough. It is very Indian, it is not British enough. They rejected it. At that time, slowly the Jews were getting into Tel Aviv, getting into Palestine. What was Palestine? They were trying to create that Jewish university in Jerusalem University there in Tel Aviv. They wanted to create it, and they wanted a design. He gave the design. Today, that particular design has been used. The design that was created based on the ancient Kanchipuram is there in Tel Aviv. It has been implemented in Tel Aviv. Okay. The point is, today we have smart cities. Today we have, in all this natural intelligence is a very powerful tool. So, if I am asking you to create a format for natural intelligence goals to be taught in higher secondary, what are the things you would include in that?
So, firstly, I won't recommend it for higher secondary. I'll recommend it for an undergrad level. What the new education policy has done is it has given the leeway to design courses as you want it, make it as malleable as possible, as flexible as possible, and the idea would be that the courses or the curriculum that you design.
Okay, then I will tell it BSc in Natural Intelligence or
BSc in natural,
BTech in Natural Intelligence.
BSc or BTech or even BA in natural
Okay.
intelligence. So why look at only from a perspective
Science.
of sciences? You can
Also
also have a
arts.
humanities perspective
Great.
to it. So the idea would be that you place it on an undergrad level, uh, and make it a course in a way that it attracts a few students from the technology side, let's say from the mechanical engineering or the civil engineering side. Then you bring in some people from design, the design school. You bring in some biologists, and make sure that the fourth year, the research year, which is the new year, that entire year is spent on a project. So until now, we've had this habit of only providing 2 months of internship, 2 or at the most 3 months of internship. That's not sufficient. You need to make these kids ready to work in the real world when they are in the college. So make them spend the entire fourth year on a project or on an interdisciplinary project that they don't spend with the same classrooms. So they work with kids from the other domains that come into it. So this can be done. This can be done through IKS, especially the humanities element of it. But I'm quite surprised that IKS is being pursued only from humanities side as of now. Have you seen any formal interaction between SERB and DST with IKS? I haven't seen that. No. So there is still that division that okay, these are serious sciences, and IKS still has that pariah sort of a status being attributed to it. What we have to do in the coming years is completely remove that division, that wall, and remove the pariah status that the IKS currently has. It has started, and that's a very beautiful thing, that's a very good thing, but the IKS now has to become mainstream eventually. So, and if it has to become mainstream, it will have to start developing courses that are relevant now and that are relevant in the immediate future, not something that is far fetched, and relevant in a way that businesses find value in it, relevant in a way that governments find value in it, relevant in a way that it becomes part of your national policy, it becomes part of your foreign policy, so on and so forth. The reason why we are discussing Indic wisdom today is because what I feel is we are trying to be the voice of global south, and our Ministry of External Affairs has already said that we've organized a good summit called the Voice of Global South Summit in the month of January this year. इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब यही है, I complete my point that इसका मतलब यही है कि we want to be the harbingers of all the indigenous knowledge that exists not only in India but in the Oceania region, in Africa, in South America, in North America. We want to bring up all the native communities of these regions, and we want to revive the ancient intelligences, the ancient knowledge systems that exist. And I think on a strategic footprint, we'll have to start working in that manner. So IKS is just the first step. The next step would be AKS, and that is ancient knowledge systems. We have to revive that, and India is the only country that can make it happen.
Okay, final question. Actually, I would have finished with this, but actually, because you mentioned about we being the voice of the global south, this question comes. There has been a lot of efforts to communicate with extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI and all that. Now that Arigbo lab, this has gone, antenna has gone, and it is now shifted to China. Right. Now, as the voice of the global south, we also have to be involved in this project in a very big manner, right? I think when Jayant Vishnu Nalikar was very much active in that project, those inter-university astronomical association and all that, India was active. Now, what is exactly the status? That is number one. And number two, you have been also a friend of Avi Loeb, right? And he has been talking about whether we have to look for the remnants of a technological civilization, alien civilization outside in the form of Homo and all that. So, what exactly is your take on that? With that, we will finish this.
So in that regards, firstly, you mentioned about mega projects, astronomy mega projects. Yes, China has taken a great lead, and they have been very, forward-looking, forward-thinking about it. Arecibo Observatory, which was in Puerto Rico, that has collapsed completely. It was once supported by the National Science Foundation, but it has now been replaced by the 500-meter spherical aperture telescope in China, FAST, which is the biggest dish. It's a half a kilometer wide dish that has been created to
They
study the
vacated
deep
an
universe.
entire village out, and now
Entire
for
cleared the entire village, cleared the entire valley. It occupies an entire valley now.
and
Uh,
even for a neutrino lab, we had to fight
Yes,
here.
yes. So we have to get over the aversion for big science. A neutrino observatory, as you rightly put, that observatory has been suffering for quite some time because of myopic visions of certain politicians and the sort of misconceptions that they spread about big science. So big science needs to be supported here, and unless and until the IKS gets charge of big science, you will always find that big science will have more Western control and now more Chinese control than an Indian stake or Indian control over it. So, if you want to really mainstream Indic wisdom, you have to pull down the wall between mainstream sciences and Indic sciences, and you have to merge the two as soon as possible.
Right. So I think with that we can finish this
Okay.
conversation.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you
It
so
was
much. It was
really
great
nice talking
conversation.
to you. Right. Thank you.